Hello, everyone. This is Christine from Kyanite Psychic Services, and today we're going to talk about dimensions of the astral. Thank you so much for being here. If you've been following along with this series that I've created, in the first video, I shared my own perspective on what the astral plane is, and I described it as an energetic reality that exists parallel to and beyond our physical universe. In the second video, I explored why astral experiences can vary so dramatically from person to person. And I looked at some of the different factors that shape how we perceive and interact with the astral. And then in the third video, I talked about different ways that we can experience the astral through dreams, meditation, non-physical senses, astral projection, and other altered states of consciousness. And I really emphasize that many of the experiences we have where we interact with the astral are much more commonplace than we might realize. So today, I want to explore another question that naturally comes about. Are there different dimensions or levels of the astral plane? And if so, how do we begin to understand them? One thing that I want to say from the get-go is that my own understanding of the astral has really evolved considerably over time. And I think that it's going to continue to do that as I continue to evolve, as I learn, as I study, meditate, and have different experiences. So, what I'm sharing today is not intended to be the definitive map of reality, but rather I'm going to share a framework that I've personally found useful. And it's helped me to begin to understand and really contextualize my own experiences and the experiences of others when I'm in the reading and healing space. So, like I talked about in the very first video, which you can find up here, I don't personally view the astral as a singular location. And I'm not alone in this. Across many different spiritual traditions, religions, and metaphysical systems, we find many different ways that people have described and organized non-physical reality. So some speak about planes, realms, the heavens, the opposite of heaven, dimensions, densities, spheres, worlds, right? Despite all these differences in terminology, there's often a shared recognition that consciousness is capable of experiencing itself in many distinct ways. So for me, the astral is best understood as an energetic reality that's intertwined with our physical experience and extends from there outwards into infinity. So if the astral is infinite, how can we possibly compartmentalize the infinite? What many of us have done is to create a map. And as humans, we create maps to orient ourselves. They give us the language for discussing our experiences. And well, every map has limitations, but that doesn't mean that maps are not useful. They are. One thing that's interesting to me that I've noticed across many different models of the astral is that there often seems to be this parallel between the way people describe dimensions of consciousness and the way many metaphysical traditions describe the energetic centers of the body, in other words, the chakras. And this isn't unique to one particular teaching, but it's something that I've observed repeatedly over the years. And I'm definitely not the only one that's noticed this. Other people have written about this. So, one of the first systems I was introduced to during my own psychic development training organized the astral into 12 dimensions. And again, I want to emphasize this is a framework, but not the framework. So, the 12 dimensions of the astral are circular or infinite as opposed to linear. In other words, if consciousness were to continue moving beyond the 12th dimension, it would eventually return to the first. And I think that's a really beautiful quality. And there are particular frequencies that we can associate with these dimensions. And I'll share that with you kind of in an overarching sense right now. So we have the first three dimensions in this particular system, and you can consider them the densest levels of the astral. These dimensions vibrate at survival, competition, growth through conflict, growth through intense emotional experiences, and intense emotional connection. If you're dreaming, for example, these dimensions might sometimes be experienced as nightmares, recurring stress dreams, feelings of frustration, also dreams where you're intimate with other people and that's all that you're really focused on, or environments that might feel a bit chaotic or heavy to navigate. And if we're spending time in these denser dimensions of the astral, we have the opportunity to really face unresolved emotions, even unresolved, unaddressed fears and energetic patterns, to release them. Moving upward to the fourth dimension, this is described often as a place where we process relationships of all kinds. So many people describe this dimension as being the most intertwined with our current earthly experience here in 2026 and thereabouts. So this dimension vibrates at partnership, family dynamics, events that occurred throughout our earthly day to day, conversations. You know, when people talk about rehashing their day in dreams, this framework could often place these experiences right there in the fourth dimension of the astral. You might have also read about people that have experiences astral projecting where they end up in a reality that is quite similar to their physical one, but just a little bit different. They're most likely also in this fourth dimension when they're having those experiences. And then moving upward to the fifth and sixth dimension, these are associated with guidance, with healing, insight, information that supports our growth. Experiences that you have with your guides, with ancestors, with teachers, members of your spirit team, they're often placed within these dimensions. So, in dreams and journeys, for example, these experiences often will leave you feeling really refreshed, supported, inspired, or deeply nourished when you wake up. And then moving up to the seventh and eighth dimensions, they're commonly understood to vibrate at the frequency of soul growth and development. So, this is where we as souls teach and learn from each other, where we can connect to the big picture, the greater picture beyond any one individual lifetime. So, it's really about your soul's growth. Many people, including me, believe that when we tap into the information of the Akashic records, that we're in this particular dimension of the astral, particularly the eighth. And then we move up to the ninth through the 12th dimensions. And this is where source, creator, divine consciousness, whatever name you'd like to use, resides, where the highest energy that there is resides. So, for example, in Christian traditions, you might think of this as heaven. In Buddhist traditions, you might consider concepts such as nirvana to resonate with aspects of these dimensions. And per my own understanding here, it's difficult for us as humans to retain or to really put into words what resides in these dimensions once we return to full waking consciousness. We might wake up with a sense that something profound occurred, but without the language or the memory to fully describe it. Personally, I've had a handful of experiences in deep trance states where I knew that I touched the vibration of these levels. But if you were to ask me to put any of it into words, I don't think I could do it. It's a feeling that I hold with me, like a memory of the feeling that I hold with me, but language can't describe it. And often for those of us that tend to be hard on ourselves, like, I can't remember my dreams, I'm trying to remember my dreams. It could be that you are visiting these realms to receive healing and enrichment, and the experiences are not to be full and taken with you back to waking life on earth. So, in other words, don't be so hard on yourself if you're not remembering. So, I haven't leaned into this framework of these dimensions, the 12 of them, because it explains every single experience that we could have in the astral. No. um, the longer that I work within my own practices of meditation, of trance, healing, and dream work, the more that I believe that this or any framework is really just the tip of the iceberg. But I've leaned into this framework because it provided me a great place to get started. It gave me a language, a map, a way to ask questions about what I was experiencing, to look at what themes are arising in my dreams, where am I going, why am I going there, what am I doing, and to really understand why some experiences might leave me or others feeling exhausted versus nourished. So, something that I find fascinating is that these dimensions appear parallel to the energetic centers of the body. And to explain that, many contemporary metaphysical traditions and texts describe a 12 chakra system. You have the seven in the body and then the remaining out of the body. And the energy and information contained within each of these chakras correlates directly to the frequencies and experiences that can be had in these various dimensions of the astral. So, for example, the fourth or the heart chakra regulates the energy of relationships. And according to this framework of the astral, the fourth dimension is all about learning and growing through, guess what? Relationships. um, so, I'm not presenting this as proof of anything, but it's a really interesting observation. And I love to use it as, let's say, a diagnostic as I gain awareness of where I'm going and what I'm doing, what energy centers within me are activated, what's coming up to be healed, and where. And I also believe that we're truly a microcosm of the macrocosm, and these parallels for me really serve to reinforce that belief. So perhaps the energetic patterns that we carry within ourselves influence how we experience non-physical reality. I talked about this in a previous video about recurring stress dreams that I had, where when I started working on my root chakra and doing a lot of healing there, all of a sudden, hey, those recurring stress dreams were no longer happening. They were gone. What I do know for certain is that as my internal landscape shifted, my energy body, my experiences on the astral shifted as well to reflect that. So for me, that correlation has been really meaningful. And I hope that you can take this and start to have more meaningful healing experiences as well. So while I found this 12-dimensional framework to be useful, I increasingly feel like, again, it's the tip of the iceberg, the beginning of a much larger picture. And I want to acknowledge too that there are many teachers and traditions, philosophies that speak of dimensions that go far beyond 12, 24 dimensions, 33 infinite dimensions. And no one of us is wrong or right. I love to remain open to the possibility that reality might be far more expansive than any framework we could come up with to describe it. And there's really a beauty and a peace in accepting what you cannot know. One more thing I want to share about dimensions. They're not places that we travel to in the way we might think of here on Earth, like going from one country to another country or traveling from Earth to the moon or to another planet. Dimensions are energetic, non-physical environments. They're states of consciousness. Another way you could think of it is frequencies through which our conscious awareness has experiences and experiences itself. So often, when we're traversing the astral, we move between different dimensions at the speed of intention. I shared an example in a previous video that I got into lucid dreaming when I was having a dream I didn't want to have anymore. It was a recurring stress dream, and there became a point where I was in the dream and thought, nope, I don't want to do this anymore. And so I set the intention to leave, and immediately I was somewhere else. And this suggests that movement within dimensions of the astral has much less to do with distance and more to do with resonance, frequency, with attention, and intention. So while it could take some practice to be able to traverse at the speed of intention, ultimately it's a no effort space, no effort action. And I also think it's important too to not look at dimensions of the astral in terms of hierarchy or levels. Within a lot of spiritual communities, as far as I've noticed, there can sometimes be this tendency to think of higher number dimensions as inherently better or more evolved. But think of, the universe as infinite. What is after the highest number, the lowest number? Consciousness does not work in a linear fashion or trajectory. So understanding that, know that every dimension does offer opportunities for learning, for growth, and experience on a soul level. If we continually find ourselves interacting with denser dimensions through dreams, astral experiences, and so forth, perhaps that's not a sign of failure, like you're not trying hard enough or you're not doing this right or that right. No, perhaps it's simply it's information and an invitation to ask, okay, what within me is asking to be seen, is being reflected back at me through these astral experiences? What's asking to be healed? What energy am I ready to acknowledge and release? So, personal story. I noticed pretty recently that I was constantly in the fourth dimension, dreaming at night. I was rehashing my day. I was talking to all kinds of people, talking to people I hadn't talked to in a long time, just really solidly in that space of relationships. But, I wanted to be higher, to gain more soul knowledge. I wanted to go to other dimensions, but I kept being squarely placed in the fourth. And when I finally let go of that need to control my astral experiences, I started to realize, okay, these interactions and what's being discussed in these dreams, this is what's really serving me best in the moment, and this is the healing that I need right now. So, for the time being, I continue to find this 12-dimensional framework to be very beneficial and practical and a meaningful place to work in. But at the same time, I want to remain open to mystery, and I hope you all do too. Dimensions are really less about places that we travel to, and it's more about the ways that our awareness is having experiences. So perhaps every framework that we create or encounter is, the best attempt at understanding an energetic universe that's so much larger than any of us can comprehend. I hope that you've enjoyed what I've had to share today, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you have your own framework for understanding dimensions of the astral? Is it similar to what I shared? Is it completely different? Feel free to continue this conversation and more in the comments below. And I want to thank you so much for being here. Be blessed, and I look forward to connecting with you in the next video.